Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours Saturday, where we answer your questions about media production. That's right, your questions. You can get them into us live by using our question system, Makana. While you're there, you can also vote the other questions up and down, live chat with other producers. If you're not in Makana, you can also go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global and get those questions into us 24/7. So if you're watching this later, you're not left out. Just go to askofficehours.global. We do got some questions going here. So Jeffrey, start us off.
Morning, CJ. Morning, everybody. Paul Walhouse from Austin, Texas, starts us off with Microsoft has Azure storage for virtual machines free for the first 6 months. How does this compare with other cloud data storage solutions like AWS, Google Drive, and the sort?
Go ahead, Alex. Oh, can't hear you, Alex.
Azure is very, very stable, and it's really generally Microsoft, in my opinion, focuses Azure on larger scale solutions for larger clients. They're not really as much a retail outlet. So if you're looking for something specific for yourself, this is probably not the right one for you. But for large storage, I think it's a great solution.
Next question.
Next question comes from Leon from Vienna, and he writes, Zoom Test Kitchen did an awesome explanation of Zoom's new controls for original sound and remote control app yesterday. What does the panel think of the updated guidance and the new app?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I'm not quite. We're not quite set up to do a demo of this today. We'll try to do that in the near future. But I did get a chance to play with it a little bit yesterday, and it is amazing. So here's what you're able to do: is you're able to have, if you have this app, the other side doesn't even have to have the app. You have an app that you can download, and if you just do search for settings in the app store, you'll see it. And basically, you can request, if you're a host or co-host, you can request access to control a variety of settings on the other side. A lot of the audio settings there, and you're able to, but you can see them as well. So I can request, CJ's setup, and I can see if he's in HD mode. I can see what kind of, there's some video settings and some audio settings, and generally the ones that we need the most. And basically, what you do is you're gonna you can request access to that. The other side gives you access to that. Then you're able to start making those changes for them. It will ask them, "Hey, this person's gonna. Alex is trying to. Tell CJ. Alex is going to change this. Are you okay with that?" Yes. Okay. So you're there. They do have to do okay. Like he's going to turn off echo cancellation. He's going to turn on original audio. All those things are things that can be turned on and off. The noise cancellation, all those things. Now, for us, as someone who deals with remote participants all the time, this is gold. This is really, really important because it allows us to it allows us to not sit there and go, okay, now if you open up the audio window, where's the audio window? It's the little microphone down in your lower left corner. And then you hit the little caret. You see the little caret? And now you're going to go into here. And now you're going to scroll down. And no, not that one. This one over here. That's what we deal with every day. So not having to do that and being able to just take control of it is really powerful. So, I mean, it's a huge jump forward for Zoom, and I'd highly recommend checking it out and playing with it because it's free and it is available in Zoom now, and it's part of the new update, and it's going to change the way a lot of us prep our guests. It's an amazing tool that just came out.
Outside of just the viewed by a lot of people are not the most adept at getting in there and tweaking their settings and moving stuff around. I can now assign someone the job, hey, it's your job to make sure that everybody's audio and video settings are in the right place. And now I don't have to, rehash kind of some of the challenges Alex was talking about saying, hey, did you go here? No, it's the third button down. Check that box. It's just, I'm so excited. Next question.
All right. Next question comes from Rayon Smith from Trinidad, West Indies. Asks, Hollyland 400S Pro 2 manual says it has a latency of 66 milliseconds, HD mode, and 56 milliseconds focus. Do you guys know what focus really means? And is there something else lower latency for event live streaming around this price point?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, that's 70 milliseconds is pretty fast. Very little low latency. That's about almost a couple of frames, and that's about it. Maybe what focus? I tried to find the manual, but I couldn't get to it in time. Perhaps what the focus mode is, it's using a little bit less compression. So if you're using the wireless transmission to pull focus remotely, which happens all the time in professional film sets, the focus puller these days works off a 15-inch monitor with a remote focus control. And you want lower latency, in other words, but 10 milliseconds probably isn't going to make much difference. But probably what the difference is, it uses less compression. So you'll have a higher resolution image delivered to the focus monitor. Maybe that's what they're talking about.
Alex?
Yeah, I haven't really gone deep enough into the Hollyland to know for sure. I think it may be trying to lower the latency there. So if you have someone doing a follow focus remotely, they have a little bit less latency to do it. Again, as Courtney said, I don't know why 10 milliseconds would make that much of a difference. That's a third of a frame. So I don't know why I would not go with the higher latency. For me, that's a pretty high latency. Most of the transmitters that we have are 1 frame or less. So this is 2 frames of latency. It just means that when you deal with audio sync, it's just how far out that one is. How far behind is the video coming from that camera if we're doing critical audio sync? So that's where that becomes more. The latency becomes more important from the transmitter. I don't think you're going to find. In my world, we don't use the Holylands that much because I have to admit that I feel like 66 milliseconds is aspirational from our experience of the Holyland, but the it always feels like it's got a little bit more and a little less stability and a little bit more latency than that. Typically we start at Teradeks and go up from there, Vislinks and 3G wireless and so on and so forth from there for some of the projects that we work on for wireless. And so it's the Holylands, I think, are the best at their price point. So they are, they're delivering a solid thing, but just know that they're not they're not mission critical. So they're really good, especially the lower end Teradeks and the Holylands are really good for providing a director with a camera tap. They can see what's going on and they can have a little monitor there and they can look at it and they can see it there. Using these in live, using the smaller ones in live streaming is really not the way they're designed to be used. And so people do use them that way, and I've used them that way, but you have to be very careful about the range, obstructions, anything else and you have to test them very heavily because, again, you're not using them in the way that you're not putting them in their best light, in that area. And so you just want to be very, very careful of how far you push them.
Next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. He goes, a UK firm has developed a sustainable alternative to PVC for pressing vinyl records. What does the panel think, and does the vinyl market have a future?
Go ahead, Alex.
The vinyl market seems to have a great future. It's constantly reinventing itself. So I have a hard time thinking about having something that gets worse every time I play it. So it's really hard for me to get around that. I don't know how long PVC would last in that kind of environment. I don't think it's as hard as what traditional vinyl records are made out of, and so I think that would be problematic. But I don't miss the pops. I have to say, I know some people really love the little pops and the clicks that you got from records and that analog sound. I don't miss it at all. So as an audiophile, and so I don't have any. I don't really look back at it, but it seems like kids these days love to go back into the old stuff. So they're enjoying these little vinyl records, and there's prints that are doing well. I have to admit, I just don't quite understand it.
Courtney?
Yeah, I'm with you, Alex. I don't understand it either. I, gladly moved away from all my vinyl and went to see when CDs came about. And now we're at, you can get fairly high resolution streaming subscriptions. So I don't know why. I think maybe it's the fascination with the album covers and the notes that you find on a large album, because you have the pictures and you have a slide out. You can read about you can have the lyric sheets there, and you can read about the band, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe that's what they're selling. Maybe they should just go back and sell that, and then just with a QR code inside that album cover that leads you to a high resolution digital download. That would be a better solution rather than pressing vinyl. And I think PVC may be a little longer life. It's a little tougher plastic. Maybe it'll scratch less, but and wear a little better than vinyl will. Can't say for sure. Exposure to sunlight does degrade it, so don't leave your albums out in the sun if they're PVC.
Alex?
Some Great Reward by Depeche Mode. That was my first CD. I can remember buying it. Like, I can still remember buying this little disc. I had probably, when I got a Sony Discman, probably, I think it would have been 80. I can't remember the year, but I think it was probably 86 or 85 or somewhere in that range. But I remember going to the record store and buying Some Great Reward, and I think it was $16.99. And I put it in and listened to it and just couldn't believe that there were no pops. It sounded great. There was no hiss. It was so clear. And so I have to admit that was the last time I bought an album. Like, they were sent to me because I was a music director. So I had some albums that people sent to me, but as soon as I heard the very first 10 minutes of a CD, I had no interest in albums again.
I got to say, I'm of the camp that I don't buy a lot of vinyl, but when the album matters, when it's an artist that I'm really passionate about, or it's an album that I think is just hits all the right spots, I'll buy that in vinyl. I'll probably play it once or twice on the vinyl, but I like having the physical thing that no matter if my CD players go away and the streaming services go away, if 20 years or 30 years from now, I'm talking to kids and saying, hey, this was, here's something that meant a lot to me. And when you can get it autographed by the artist and all that, it's nice. But the other thing that I like about vinyl is not so much anything about the quality of the sound. It's more about the intentionality of you're going to sit down and listen to an album. I love music, and I have the discipline to sit down and listen to an album when I'm on Spotify. A lot of people jump all over the place. And the friction of having to change out a record makes people listen to a song that they might be like, up, skip. And sometimes that's what builds a relationship, with a piece of music. Alex?
I just have to admit, as a kid who grew up making mixtapes all the time, like the idea that I listened to albums, and there's certain albums that I can remember listening to because I was lazy and I just listened to them over and over again and they were great. But I made so many I was constantly making mixtapes, and I made I had a DJ rig to do the mixtape so I could mix all the songs over top of each other. And when I realized I could do that in Premiere, it changed my mixing completely. But so I was using Premiere to build the mixtapes, and so I could do crossfades. I just love the fact that I can go through. I mean, I do exactly what you just said. But the problem, which is that what I do is my if I'm sitting waiting for something, a lot of times I'm trying to build a mix. Like, I have this acoustic mixtape that I like. It's all the Noah Kahns and the Luminaires and that kind of thing that I'm constantly working on right now. And I'll go through it. I'm in a mode right now where I'm listening to all this acoustic stuff. Sometimes I'll be doing a workout tape, or I'll be doing whatever. But I'll play one song. I'll search one song in Apple Music, and then I'll say, okay, you just keep playing. Like, I just keep going forward. So it just gives me songs like that song. And I do exactly what CJ is talking about. Nope. Oh, I like that. And I find songs that are like, I found some artist that she's got like 600 followers on YouTube. You just dig into it and you find these songs that you decide you like. And that person has very little following. I've never heard of them before. And you throw them into the mix. And to me, that was, in the land of you never heard anything that didn't, wasn't geared for 100,000 sales. It's great to be able to find these kind of really rare gems of artists that are people I've never heard of before and everything else. I feel like it's a whole new world as far as finding those songs. And then we go back and listen to, you'll realize that, if you like acoustic music, if you don't like acoustic music, you won't like this, but you'll realize that after you listen to Stick Season from Noah Kahn, we were talking about this in the pre-show, you'll realize that all of his songs are good. You can listen to his whole album. Anyway, so that's that. But I find that I'm introduced to music at a level that I can't remember. Even when I was a music director and 10 new singles came to me every morning to listen to, I didn't see as much new music as I do now.
Courtney?
Yeah, I misread this question. I'm sorry. And the question is a PVC free record as opposed to vinyl, so that they've most records are polyvinyl chloride, which is PVC, which is, they use vinyl for short for PVC. But there's a company that's apparently in 2022, a British company, developed a bioplastic record that is gets it free of the polyvinyl chloride. The bioplastic is made from sugars, starches, rather than oil or gas.
And you can see how much we know about vinyl.
It's green.
Like we got into this whole discussion, but I don't know if PVC is as good as vinyl.
You can break it up and sweeten your tea with it as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think that if you're trying to save the environment, the vinyl is probably not the first place that I would spend energy on, just because it's not like, I guess it makes you feel better, but there's so little of it. And so anyway.
Next question.
Next question comes from Chris Widener from Indianapolis, Indiana. He goes, has anyone done a remote contribution kit with pass-through capture for speakers at a remote meeting for broadcasts? Looking to set up some of our clubs to broadcast their meetings without needing on-site services for setup.
Alex?
We built a lot of these. It just depends on how far you want to go. So at minimum, we try to fix people's mics. Obviously, when you're setting up for broadcast, now we move away from the mics that we typically show you. We go back to labs. We go to a lot of our kits have shotguns in them, and so one of the things that we do oftentimes is I have a shotgun right here as a backup, and a lot of them are we'll have a shotgun, and it is designed to be right outside of it. We build our broadcast kits, even if they're going to be set up by the user, pretty detailed broadcast kits, teleprompters and cameras. And we have what we call the brain, which is like a bit of a box at the bottom with lights. The key is training. So we send a PDF, we send a little movie of how it gets built. We try to we mark things very clearly so someone can put it together. It's not so much how to make it just easy, like you just unfold it, because when you make it easy to unfold, you generally are cutting a lot of corners in where those lights are and the quality of the audio and the quality of the video. And there's a whole bunch of things that you start giving up when you do that. And so we do that for some of the smaller kits, but for the larger kits, we want to look really good. We will send out some pretty complex kits to make that happen. So you just have to decide what your area, what your price point will be. The key things is, how are you going to mic them? Is it going to be a lav or a shotgun? Because typically it's going to be out of frame. Number two is you got to send them an in-ear, and you got to persuade them to put it on. I mean, when they're going back and forth to a room, you can do it. So when we do really high profile, like heads of state or really high profile politicians, they don't want anything in their ear because they don't want people to feel like someone's talking to them. So as a result, we have to put a lot of times we'll either put the shotgun up, and then behind the shotgun, where the shotgun will actually do reduction on the sound, we put the speaker. And so the shotgun comes out and the speaker comes out. And usually the speaker is sitting underneath the teleprompter. And we find that has worked pretty well when we get, basically we're using a Dugan Auto Mix inside for the speaker, so that it's pushing the speaker down when they're hearing something from the other, or pushing the mic down when they're hearing someone else, and when they talk, it pushes the speaker down. And so we use that Dugan Auto Mix inside for that individual person. The other thing that we've done is put the speakers right behind the person. So and then we use a lav. And the reason we do that is that their body acts as a big block for that speaker, and they can just hear the speaker behind them. And it's worked okay as well. So those are things you can do to tie those folks in. But if you just want to give them an in-ear, you can give them a lav or a shotgun. The reason we like to use shotguns is because a lot of the higher profile folks we work don't like to be touched, and so they tend to screw up the labs. So anyway, so those are some of the things that we think about as we start to build those things out. But yeah, we've definitely set a lot of those up. And the other thing you want, if you have the budget, is to build something that you can control. So we send them out with a Mac Mini. That Mac Mini can attach to the Mix Pre, can attach to the switcher, can attach to those things, so that we can make adjustments to everything from the camera to the audio as we're listening to it. And that's made a big difference.
Next question.
Next up is from Abe Barrera from Flowery Branch. He says, looking at the OWC Express 4M2, do you recommend I buy the SSD drives from OWC or from somewhere else?
Alex?
for some reason I thought those were NVMe drives, not SSD drives. And if they, so I think you're looking, and they're not the same. they look very similar, but they are not the same thing. And so you cannot intermingle the SSD little cards and the NVMe's. They're very similar, but they have different notches, and you will break them. Ask me how I know. Anyway, so the NVMe's, you can buy those NVMe's anywhere. You can definitely, I mean, OWC, the advantage you're going to get is they're going to be a little bit more expensive, and they spend a little bit more time verifying them. And so that's what you get from OWC. But the SSDs themselves, I mean, the NVMe's, I get a lot of Samsungs the Samsung ones work really well. And again, you'll probably save a little bit, especially if you decide to put in 4 terabyte or 8 terabyte. You're going to save money, a significant amount of money buying them from Amazon.
Jeffrey, sorry.
And if you do go from OWC, you get the full support package, which means that if let's say you buy Kingston NVMe's and put it in there and you have a problem, you might get that bounce back of go over to Kingston for support, go over to OWC for support.
Next question.
Next question comes from Gabriela. I apologize. Extrano Mestrale of Sault Ste. Marie, and she goes, I really like the Komodo, but with all this talk today, it seems the panel doesn't like it at all. Why shouldn't I use this red when making a logo shot for a client?
Samuel?
Well, I think the red is a good camera. The real selling point for the red Komodo is that it has global shutter. So if you need global shutter, if you do like fast movements or whip pens or whatever, then it's probably one of the most inexpensive cameras that has rolling shutter. And so I would look at that. It also has some RAW capabilities. I've seen it being used for live streaming. I've never used it myself. And as what I've heard is that there's a good app to control it. So it gives a lot of good remote settings in the app then. But I've never used it myself.
Alex?
As live folks, one of the problems that we've always had with the Reds is the fans were really loud. So it was really hard for us you could use them if you were doing audio separately, but a lot of the Reds made a lot of noise. And I've used them from the very first Red 1 up through Raptors. And I think that the noise, and then we put up with a lot. I think a lot of us at the very beginning put up with a lot of the problems that we had managing the data coming off the Reds. And I think that as it got easier for other cameras, I think we just started not having as much fun using the Reds. and so we, it was a lot of like the idiosyncrasies of the Red we put up with because it was the best camera we could possibly buy at the price that we could get it at. And that changed. And then we now have a whole slew of cameras that cost less than the Reds that still produce pretty great content. And so I think that they got themselves in a bind because they weren't the best, but they also weren't the cheapest. And it was hard for us to see enough of difference between them. So there are definitely people who love Reds and they still use them. But I think that it was hard for me as, the Reds lived in a world where I was like, I'm going to rent that. Like if anything over about $6,000 or $8,000, I look at a rental. I don't look at purchasing unless, and so I'm renting those cameras. Below that, I'm buying those cameras because I want to have them around and I want to work on them and so on and so forth. And so they're in this unhappy position where they were too expensive for everyone to buy as many as they want. And I've owned a couple. The Scarlett, I bought a bunch of Scarletts for something, and then again, fan. So anyway, so they lived above the instant buy, but they live below, but their quality is below the Arri and the Venice and some of the other cameras that are out there. And so we would just go ahead and, if I'm going to pay per day, I might as well just get an Arri, or might as well just get a Venice to do that. And they're, again, many of us are live folks, and Reds are not good live. like they are not a live camera. They are a film camera. And again, they produce great images. I'm not going to, and they were really, really great in a moment. I think that But most of us moved, if we had the choice to get into the higher end reds, a lot of us moved past them, to Venices and Aries. I will say that the Raptor has been used a lot in the kind of the stereo 180 world, and we might see more of that coming up.
Samuel?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add real quick that Linus Tech Tips, they used to use these cameras, and they had like a whole bunch of them, but now they've gone away from them to the Sonys for probably a lot of the reasons that Alex mentioned.
Next question.
Next up is from Rayon Smith again, from Trinidad, West Indies. This asks, can each of you pro camera guys do a show soon with how each of you have set up cameras at different types of events in the past and future, similar to what Alex did with the Telestrator and photo examples?
Alex?
Yeah, one of the things that we're going to be doing soon is, as we get ready for NAB and some of the other bits and pieces, we're going to show you behind the scenes of us putting those things together. So how those rigs get put together, and what they look like. You'll see that at NAB to do that. So I don't know if that's soon enough for you, but we will be talking about how to build those rigs up. And I will try to show, I'm building this crazy shoulder rig right now that is in, the pieces are still coming in that I've ordered, but they should all be here sometime next week. And over the next couple of weeks, I'm building this rig for NAB, and we'll do a breakdown of it at some point, a little show and tell before we get to NAB about what it looks like and how it works.
Jeffrey?
I've always been the type of modder hacker. When it came to doing my video stuff, I remember going to my first CES, and I had the Kodak ZI-8 camera, and I would we put on wireless microphone. I made a cage for that thing, and I remember walking around CES with that, and everybody was just like in awe. Every time I've done something like that, I've made a video on it on my website for sure. So I definitely can go back and show a lot of different configurations that I've done with doing one-on-one interviews, including interviews where I'd have more than one camera. So and I tried that. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, that would be definitely something fun to do and remember.
Alex?
I think it'd be a good contrast, because I think that Jeffrey likes to kind of hack things together and print things and so on and so forth. And I am like there's a tool for this and I'm going to buy it. so it's a very different, two very different approaches to how we build the rigs. And so I think it'd be really good for everyone to see both sides of that puzzle. It'd be useful. Yeah, absolutely.
Next question.
Next up is a QR code question from Ignacio Madero from Madrid, Spain. And he goes, great Q&A today. Alex, it would be possible to dedicate a second hour to AWS Elemental Link and most common AWS services that you use. I would love to see a practical session on that topic.
Go ahead, Alex.
We should definitely do that. Yeah, so we'll take a look at it. We'll look at our schedule. Our schedule on Fridays is pretty full, but we can definitely look at when we can put a link session back in. They've made some updates to it as well, so we'll take that into account.
Next question.
Paul Walhus from Austin, Texas goes, when I walk into a truck stop these days, all the truckers are wearing Blue Parrot headsets. I've seen OH folks wearing them as well. Is this the ultimate road warrior headset?
Courtney?
Well, yeah, I guess so. If you're a trucker, I haven't worn any here. We tend to use the kind that are a little more discreet. This has an ear pad that covers the ear, so it isolates your hearing for that communications a lot. So if you're a trucker, you're sitting in the cab, you got a lot of road noise. This also has a noise canceling microphone that puts that about an inch from the side of your mouth. That's going to help quite a bit. As you may know, that most Bluetooth connections in your car that have microphones and a speaker for listening to connect your phone to the car's audio system usually have a mic mounted up in the headboard, or sometimes in the sun visor. That can get pretty noisy in a truck cab, which has a lot of wind noise because a lot of the time the windows are open and the truck engine is sitting right there in the cab with you in most of the trucks. So remember, the engine is like right there, right beside you. So
Alex?
I think it's probably the best Bluetooth headset purely for comms. So that's probably why you see a lot of truckers. I don't know if it's the ultimate headset, Road Warrior headset, but as a headset that is, there's a couple things about it. One is the range is really good. You can get pretty far away and still be able to get a signal out of it. And so I think that that's a particularly useful one. It also has the noise cancellation is pretty good. It's pretty thin. So it's a little bit, it's really, the cutoff is really just your vocal range. So it doesn't pick up a lot above and below it, which makes it, I find that if we're all on those, I do get a little bit of fatigue just because everyone's voice is very compressed right into this little centerpiece of what it does to make it listenable, or make sure that you can understand it. It gets a little hard on the ears after a while. But I will say it's also got incredible battery life. It'll last all day. Like, you're going to plug it in at night, you can turn it on the next day. And so, like, for instance, I prefer the open comms. So I have a couple of the open comms. Why do I have a couple? So one can charge while the other one is being used, because they're not going to last all day. And so those are the things that, now I like those there. I think that and I know this sounds crazy, I'm usually all about wired, but I moved to the open comms for most of my comms when I'm in the field. And the reason for that is just I just kept on getting my wires caught up while I'm setting things up and doing it. And I find so little. I use the open comms 3 to 4 hours a day, and I don't have that many problems. The biggest problem I have with any Bluetooth headset is when someone calls me, for some reason my iPhone requires me to select their headset. If you have an Apple headset, it just automatically connects, and with other ones you have to tell it, even though you were just listening to music with it. Like, it says, oh no, you have to choose it. So it's some kind of security thing. But outside of that, once it's connected, the only other thing that I do with any of my Bluetooth headsets is I only connect them to one device. So I don't bounce them around to a lot of devices and so on and so forth. If you do that, then they're going to have a tendency to jump to the wrong one. So I have one device that they're connected to, which is my phone or whatever phone I'm using for that thing. And that's it. And if I do that, I literally have no stability issues. And I like the fact that with all of them, you swing that thing back, and you turn it off. And anyway, the Bluetooth is really, the Blue Parrot's really good. We've owned a bunch of them. We've had a lot of 450s. The 650 looks very nice.
I'd also like to throw in, as someone who for about 7 years drove 65,000 miles a year for work, the Anker Work, I think it's the H700, is another really good option. It has the boom arm, and I thought the sound was really good coming into me, and then I said some not nice things to somebody in traffic while the other person was on the phone. They're like, "You're in the car?" Like, I got that on multiple occasions, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a great headset. And when you walk into the Loves or the Flying J and you see all the truckers with the boom arms, you feel, you're with your people. Next question.
Next up is another QR code from Nunhui Hahi, Black Bear Marshall from Oihe. And the question is, my questions don't seem to be taken in the QR code page. They just sit in the window when I hit the submit button, and there's no confirmation that they are sent. Am I using the page wrong?
Alex, what do you think?
You might be. You got the question in here with the QR code, I think. So it seems to be working some of the time. So I don't know if it's totally broken. We only took this one because of the QR code about a QR code. Generally, this would be a Sunday question just for notes for everybody else. But yeah, so given that you just put it in as a QR code, I think that there just may be something that's happening when you're tapping it. You might need to take a look at what's actually happening on a moment by moment. Are you using the same device that's having trouble, or are you using, look at those things.
Next question.
Next up is from Douglas Carmichael. Pro Tools 2024.3 now supports MIDI effects, real-time MIDI processing. Can you see PT catching up to Logic Ableton Pro and all in the electronic music market?
I don't have a whole lot of experience with the Pro Tools set. I know that I've used Logic more than Ableton in that way too. But Alex, I think you've used a little bit of this.
I don't think that for what I don't think Pro Tools is focusing on this market. so I don't think that this is not the market that they're looking for. So I think that it probably will not go down the same path.
Next question.
Next up is from Chris Widener from Indianapolis, Indiana. This seems to be a pretty decent pass-through encoder. He's got a link in the question. I got 2 pre-program and I send out for clubs to send me feeds and then a camera feed via Larix. Other than this pairing, any suggestions for live capture of remote in-person meetings?
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a so what he's showing here. Let me pop it up here. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. So this is the encoder here. So this has got this is basically allowing you to pass through, and then you're encoding it back out again. It doesn't look like it's available right now, but so anyway, so this is a a small encoder here. I don't think I have any other suggestions. I oftentimes worry about some of these encoders, the quality of the H.264 compression and some of the other things that are there are not as high as I'd like them to be. So so that's the only concern that I would have.
Next question.
Next up is from Eric Hertz from Hartford, Connecticut. In Zoom meetings, I need to be able to see one to 4 key co-presenters in my camera eye line. How can I build a multi-view for only these key participants and send it to a teleprompter screen?
Alex?
I mean, typically we use a switcher for that. So we would use something. I mean, you can build that in a lot of ways. Depends on how much latency you want, what kind of control you need. So so that's the thing to look at there is to, we would use I would use an Extreme or something else and just use the super source and build that out for myself. So using some kind of multi-view or super source, you can build that out inside of a variety of pieces of software. But I would be taking Zoom ISO, exporting those out, or you can pin all 4 of them you can screen scrape if you really want to do that. You can screen scrape them, pin them to a window, have another participant jump in, pin 4 of them, and then you're going to get them, and then you can send it to whatever you want. So that'd be another kind of low latency, relatively inexpensive way to do it.
Samuel?
Yeah, the way I'm doing it right now is I'm doing a desktop capture of my Zoom multi-view, and then capturing it into vMix, and then sending it out through the HDMI and vMix, and then I'm flipping it inside of vMix. You can do the same with OBS and probably a lot of other software switchers.
Courtney?
Yep, Samuel got it. I was going to recommend OBS if you're going to be doing it from Zoom calls. If you're using signals that are coming from cameras, then you can get a decimator quad split that takes 4 SDI inputs and makes a multi-view.
Next question.
Ronnie Hosfoy from Tromsø, Norway asks, I own a set of Sennheiser 660S and seek new, better ways to enjoy music on it. Recommendations for a suitable source services, players, preamps, and setups. Looking for a value within a moderate budget that can be used at home and in my living room.
Alex?
Sorry. This is... I will admit that, I mean, again, I think Mickey's suggesting Tidal, and I think the Tidal is a solid solution there. As far as looking at high quality, I will say that I've really thought about the Apple Music stuff is as far as the the spatial and so on and so forth has really ruined me. Like if I go to now, and Tidal has some immersive as well, but Tidal's not doing it across as many. I found that after listening to I subscribed to Tidal, whatever their top thing was, and I listened to Tidal, and I started listening to the same tracks on Tidal and Apple Music, and it may just be my ears, but I like the Apple Music versions better. And so, and I found Tidal's interface to be frustrating, and so I just really I wanted to like Tidal, for a variety of reasons, and I just couldn't. Just couldn't get myself around it. It may have just been in the tools that I used that I felt like it was, but a Tidal is the highest end. It's supposed to be the highest end there, but I just found that I couldn't find what I needed. I found that the average track, there are definitely tracks that sound better in Tidal. The average track sounds better in Apple Music. And so, in my opinion, and so I think that, Tidal is pretty limited in what it goes. And so, and I know Mickey says he doesn't enjoy the Apple Spatial in headphones at all, but I do. So I think so there's, you'll have to also decide what your taste is. I have to admit that I'm so used to it now that I can barely listen to stereo in my headphones. Like I can just barely listen to regular stereo, and it just sounds very flat to me. So it's anyway.
It's interesting. I find that I don't notice it when I'm listening on headphones as much. But when I'm in my living room, and I have stuff and it's playing through the surround, and then all of a sudden it goes to a track that doesn't have a spatial mix, and you're like, what happened? Like, this just, everything went away.
It really had me realize that what the effectiveness of what Apple's doing is they're ruining your experience. If you have both of these, they're ruining your experience with Spotify. And Spotify can't do what Apple's doing because Spotify, I don't think they can, because Android and Windows are so difficult to develop spatial for that it makes it very, very hard for Spotify to follow Apple down a path that Apple's going. And again, I think that I've gotten so used to it now that I get used to listening to music that way, and when I listen to it anything else, it's interesting.
When Apple Music came out with their lossless, the first thing I did was, okay, there's $20 a month I get back in my life. Like, Tidal went away because I was like, I'm paying for Tidal and Spotify. And does anybody have one of those Pono players, though? Remember in 2015, Neil Young had that crazy?
I ordered one. I have one around here somewhere. It's in a drawer somewhere.
Did it work?
It was fine. It was just, again, I think the problem is that I've really gotten into the primary thing that I'm doing. I want it to sound good, obviously. And when I go back to Spotify now, it just feels blah. Like it just feels gray all the time. So I don't really like Spotify that much. And the problem is that between Spotify and Apple and all the other services, I'm really exploring for new music. So I'm out there, what I would call, musically spelunking, and trying to find new songs and going back to my roots of being a music director and so on and so forth, trying to find great tracks that aren't popular yet and throwing them into my mixes and stuff like that. And so I needed the recommendation engine to be really strong. I do think that Spotify, it's one of those things. Like I think some stuff sounds better on Tidal than Apple Music, but not much. But you give up a lot when it comes to exploration. And then Spotify, you have better exploration tools, but I don't like the sound. And so Apple Music I wouldn't say is the perfect solution. It's just better than the other ones, all taking everything into account.
Next question.
Next up is from John Fisher from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. When limited on space for physical displays, would you ever recommend using a dummy plug or ghost display adapter to throw presentation slides to for presenting?
Alex.
I think those are kind of two different questions for me. So we have used dummy plugs, and the reason that we use those is specifically, the ghost display adapter. I'm not sure if, but when I want that second screen and I don't have it, so if you want to have that second screen show up, we've definitely used dummy HDMI, outputs, and so those are basically they identify themselves as a monitor. They go, "Hey, I'm a monitor," and it plugs in. Like for instance, Zoom should give me both windows when I open it on a single window, but it won't. It'll say, like Zoom will not. If you I don't think you'll get the second window from Zoom unless you have a second monitor plugged into it. And so by putting the dummy adapter in, you're able to get that second monitor back and do whatever you want with it.
Jeffrey?
One thing that I've done is that I've put in the dummy plugs. In fact, we kind of did that back when Zoom ISO first came out with the pluggables. You would get those dummy adapters put into the HDMI ports and then use NDI to bring in the monitor, because what you could do is then bring NDI in and then you have a monitor within a monitor, which is what I kind of think what you want to do here. So that would be one way I would do it.
Another trick that I actually picked up from a utility that Jeffrey recommended was the Better Display utility will allow you to create a virtual display, which if you're on a Mac, it will see it as a second display. And then you can throw things to it, but still have a window that you can move around to actually see it. And if you happen to be in Keynote, you can put Keynote into windowed mode so that you can still see your presenter display and what's going out live to the audience if you're just doing it for rehearsals. Next question.
But there is no Windows version of that. So Eric Hertz from Hartford, Connecticut goes, is there an API for this new Zoom remote settings management feature? The goal is to standardize AV settings for dozens of remote participants.
Alex?
I don't believe that there is an API yet for it. Typically, APIs, especially when a company is trying to get things out into the market and figure out how people are going to use them, APIs you want to put off. I'd be surprised if we get an API in less than a year. And the reason for that is that this is a new thing for Zoom, and they're going to put those things together, and then they're going to see how people operate with them, see what the best case scenarios, best use cases are, see what other things people want. As soon as you create an API, it may seem like, oh, they're being opaque, but what it does is it takes away the flexibility from the developer because now people start building their tools on it, and they start complaining on Twitter every time you change them. So a lot of times APIs come, a ways after the product is released, so that the developing company has the time to figure out exactly what they want to do, and then they can start building the hooks for it.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz from St. Paul, Minnesota asks, what portable power station solutions are there for a remote cart? No lead acid.
Courtney?
I would use lead acid, but there are solutions these days that use the newer lithium ion or lithium ferrous or whatever the current battery technology is in lithium ion batteries. Here's one that you can get at Costco for around $600. It's an EcoFlow Power 2. Then the advantage to this depends also on whether you need AC or not. If you're just going to use DC at different voltages, you don't need something like this, which has an inverter in it. And Jackery makes one. This is EcoFlow. The nice thing about these is they can recharge to 100% in just about an hour and a half or hour and 20 minutes. The one disadvantage is you can see it here on the side. Look, it probably has a fan in it. So most of the ones that have these inverters in them may have fans in them to keep them cool, and that may be a consideration for you if you're doing sound and you're in a quiet set. So bear that in mind.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, a couple years ago, we were all looking at what was called Generarc at the time, now Geniverse. They're still around, but they've retooled their business, but their sister company, which is Jackery, has been taking over a lot of the portable power solutions. Another one that I've run into is a company called Bouger RV, which makes solutions for RV goers. And I've created a couple setups where I can go into where a band's playing. I can go in, I can set up. I've got the power solution, and I put it in a spot where you don't hear anything, mostly under a table. But the best part is that you don't have to plug into their walls, or you can plug into their walls and you still have a power savings like a backup battery if you needed to.
Next question.
Next question comes from Fred Parr from Kent and asking, does anyone on the panel use a Blackmagic ATEM streaming bridge? Any thoughts?
Samuel?
Yeah, the thing about the ATEM streaming bridge is that it has quite a bit of latency, and then you need really good internet for it to work. If you have a little bit fluctuating bandwidth, then it will break up pretty fast. So I would look at SRT to do SRT as alternative, because it's probably about the same latency, and it's a lot more reliable, at least over congested networks.
Alex? We tested them early on, and I found that, again, like Samuel had talked about, the latency was a little higher than it was kind of like this unhappy medium in that it was higher than WebRTC, but the stability wasn't as good as SRT. And so there was like this, it just wasn't as, we just didn't know where we would use it. I think that was the issue, was we kind of got into this like, I don't know what I'm going to use this box for. And so I think we were excited about the idea that we could transport those things. But in reality, we just didn't find that the latency was low enough to have a conversation to the level that we were expecting. And the stability wasn't as good as SRT or Zixi. And it just didn't seem like it fulfilled any need that we had.
Next question.
Next up is from Brian Enright from New York City. Recommendations for right-cleared music services for in-person events.
Alex, what do you know?
what you're looking for is ASCAP and BMI licenses if you're trying to use something that's in an event. I will say that it's expensive to do this if you have a lot of people, and it's a little bit painful to go through the process. So you just want to know that going into it that it's going to be a thing. Many of the companies that I've worked with, I mean, unless they have partnerships with musicians, many of them have been moving away from using those, and so they're building their own. They'd rather hire out a composer and do a buyout of having, working with them, having them put something together for them, and that has become relatively inexpensive depending on the quality that you're looking for. And so it can be, your own content for walk-ons and walk-offs and other things like that. Is now if you're talking about a party or an event that you're going to want everyone dancing, or you want them to have certain kinds of music, and you're trying to call that in, then again you're going to go back to ASCAP and BMI to figure that out. But if you're doing it for like walk-ons and walk-offs and pre-show and everything else, a lot of the folks that we've worked with have started to just move into having their own collection of stuff. That a lot of times what they do is they will hand someone a song and say, "I want it to feel like this. I just don't want it to be the song." And so it's and they get a lot of songs that are outside of what would be considered, it keeps them in the legal realm, but it's close, So and so they hint towards it.
Next question.
Next question from James Haldane from Vancouver, Canada. Doing a production in a remote northern community, we have low humidity in the room. Occasionally, when I touch the Scarhoy PTZ controller, I experienced a static shock, causing Scarhoy to freeze. Issues was resolved by rebooting. Thoughts?
Alex, ground us.
Yeah, grounding is a big deal. So if you're in a dry community, you really have to worry about this. This can destroy your show. You can hear it in the show. You can kill your electronics. I once watched a $250,000 machine basically become worthless in less than a second, by someone not putting a grounding strip down to make that actually work. So there's a couple things that you can do that might make a difference. One is you can put mats on. I mean, if you're really having a problem with it, you have to really think about it. Now, what I tend to do at minimum is I'll tap things. So I have a grounded plate somewhere or a grounded mat, and I'll just sit there and I'll just tap it before I touch anything else as I walk in. So that's a minimum of what you want to do. Oftentimes there are grounding mats that we use to build electronics, which have wristbands. So if you're having a constant problem, you may want to think of having your production people put on a grounded wristband. That's what we use when we're working on electronics to make sure that this doesn't happen. And so that might be another thing. You can also go barefoot on a grounding mat. Just in case you're wondering, you can have your feet on one, and there's a whole industry about grounding, like earthing or grounding or whatever. And so you can just go barefoot and you'll be grounded all the time as you sit down. Your clients will think you're crazy because you're walking around barefoot, but you can just say, "Hey, this is a technical need." Now you have an excuse to walk around backstage barefoot. But grounding is your problem. There is a potential difference between the voltage that you have and where you're at, and the ground. Electricity always wants to go home.
Courtney.
I was going to mention the grounding straps. It look like something like this. You can get them from Amazon for around $6. Not a big deal. You just clip the little gator clip to something that is grounded with a solid ground, and that'll keep the static from building up in your body. Another solution possibly is, and I've noticed this a lot on these, if you've got a chair that has PVC wheels on it and it's rolling around on a plastic floor protector of some sort, that builds up a high voltage static charge. You can spray the carpet, if it's carpet or a carpet protector that's plastic, with Static Guard, which will help keep it from building up a static charge. So you could try that as well.
Alex?
And, some of these grounding mats, what they have is they have a cable that goes out, and it's got like a little circular thing that's designed to go into the ground of your outlet, that's there. Number one is make sure the outlet is correctly, put together there, because you can do a lot more damage that way. But the other thing is that try not to do that to the to the power supply right in front of you. And the reason for that is that if someone lifts the ground somewhere further down the path, it doesn't do any good. So anyway, so you have to you want to look for either the house provided system or you want to try to get it into the wall.
Next question.
Next comes from a QR code from Gabriela Esteso Menstiera from Sault Ste. Marie. John Gruber was mentioned today, but what about the foundational work done with the Higgins boys too? How has this been forgotten?
Alex?
I think it's a different John Gruber. So the John Gruber I think that we've mentioned in the past is a tech writer, and I don't think he's connected to the Higgins boys.
Yes. The Higgins boys and Gruber, early 90s comedy sketch show. So we are dispelling the rumor. He did not grow up to be a Mac blogger, but was Dave Allen who played him was in Freaks and Geeks. So anyway, next question.
Next up comes from David Brady from New York City. Alex, the call audio routing can be set to default to any Bluetooth headset via settings, accessibility, touch, call audio routing. Makes no sense, but it works.
Alex?
Ah, the answer. Thank you, David.
Of course,
that's
it's
all
in
I have
touch.
to say.
Where else would it be?
I now have to leave the show so I can set up all my phones. All right.
Next
it's
question.
Great. It's a great tip.
Thank you, David.
Next up comes from Paul Walhouse from Austin, Texas. Would you agree that this photo taken with a $13,000 R5 with the Canon RF 600mm f4 is photo of the year, according to Outdoor Magazine? Worth $13,000?
Go ahead, Alex.
I can't. The link that was sent didn't get me to a place that told me that showed me what the photo actually was. There's a whole bunch of eagle photos, and they all look really amazing. But I can't. I don't know which one is the one. I guess it. Yeah, I don't know. So you'd have to send us one that is just linked to the photo. Next
it is
question.
amazing how much cheap. It is amazing how much cheaper the RF super telephotos are compared to the EF mount ones. I was just shopping for a super telephoto to shoot stuff for the Eclipse, and I was just doing price comparisons, and it was a significant difference in the technology there. But next question.
Next question from Eric Hertz from Hartford, Connecticut. Is there an API for the Zoom Sessions production studio that enables programmatic selection of scene speakers?
Go ahead, Samuel.
I don't think there is, at least not when I was playing with it last year, at the end of the year. But Zoom is working very fast, so I wouldn't be surprised if they come up with something at Stream Deck to control or something.
Next question.
Next up is from Douglas Carmichael. ESPN is adding VR headsets on the announcers to immerse them in the game. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think they could make a lot of sense. I mean, they'd be able to see a lot more than what they're seeing from a smaller package. So I think it could make sense.
Courtney?
Until you want to shoot them on close-up between James, and they've got these goggles on their faces, and you can't see them. Or you see their avatar, which might be a little scary to the viewers.
And Jeffrey?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of people will start putting in their contracts no VR headsets while on camera. But when they're off camera, if they need to take a look at something close by, maybe that'll be the easy thing. Then again, it's trying to switch back and forth, and then you'll have goggle eyes. I don't know. That might just not work for them.
Alex?
Many of the smaller shows only show the announcers before or after the show, and they never show them during it because they just don't have the resources to shoot them. So they're just giving commentary, and I think in those environments it probably makes sense.
All right, well, that's going to do it for another great Saturday. Just a reminder for everyone, coming up in about 1 hour from now, we have the new panelist meeting. So that's a Sunday-style meeting for us as panelists to talk about the topic of the day or topics of the day. So if you were at the new panelist meeting last week, you are free to come to this one as well. Tomorrow we've got introspection. So remember, that's a live-only show. So tune in, get your questions in. It's an introspection. We're talking about the show. And then we've got an awesome week coming up for the next week. Optimizing Resource Management Monday, Memo Composer on Tuesday, Audio Theater Wednesday. We're doing NAB stuff on Friday. I mean, it's just jam-packed. I'm so excited. Thank you to everybody on the back end for keeping us rolling today and for getting all of us looking and sounding good. Thanks to the panel for being here. You are all doing an awesome job every day, and we appreciate all that insight that you're bringing. And also thank you to our producers. without whom we wouldn't have any questions to talk about. And you always are throwing us curveballs and keeping us on our toes. For the Tulalip Traversal today, we traveled 56,000 miles, 90,000 kilometers, and that's 443 million bananas for scale. See you in after hours.
Banana pancakes.
I have to admit, I was like, oh, I don't want one question on the other side of the conversion. I was like, I don't want to get to the other side. I was like, let's just.
And now part two. End of part two.
I was like, I really wanted to hit 57. I was like, you can do it. I missed it. Courtney, I just let you know, on my Courtney Gooden bingo card, lead acid battery is center square.
I think they're great. You just have to have 16 hours to recharge them.
I started reading the question. I was like, Courtney's going to say lead acid battery. And I said, no lead acid. No.
I was in Tanzania. I was working somewhere where they had like a whole wall of them, and it just powered the whole building if they lost power, all the Macs. So it was a pre-press shop, and so they didn't want to lose any. You lose a power often enough. They had a generator, and so the batteries only had to work for about a minute.